Hi, I'm Lisa. I've lived in Hannah's shadow for years. All her life, she was always the most beautiful, the most popular, the most successful. With her tall height, slim waist, flawless features, and radiant beauty, it was natural for her to attract people's attention. I had been her best friend since we were children, or more precisely, I had always played second fiddle in her life. Next to Hannah, I was the diminutive, overweight, insecure, and constantly in her shadow. I never learned to trust myself until I was 29. All people saw when they looked at me was Hannah's dimmer, less impressive friend. And worst of all, I believed it. Hannah's place in my life was always unquestionable. I was willing to be humiliated, criticized, and sometimes even ostracized by her. But I never let her go, because part of me knew that I couldn't be like her, so I clung to her. Time passed, and Hannah continued to be the winner of life as always. She had a great career, and then she married a great man. Everything that Hannah had was an unattainable dream for me. But the worst thing was that over the years, I completely lost faith in myself. Instead of living my own life, I was following hers. But then something happened. There was a man who saw me for me, but he was the wrong man, or maybe Lisa, the right one. I don't know. Now I need to share my experiences with someone because I don't know where I went wrong, where I didn't see the right thing. I don't know. Can you tell me what to do? Like I said, my name is Lisa. I'm 29 years old. I have long red hair, big green eyes, and porcelain skin. When people look at me, they say I'm beautiful, but for years I didn't believe it, because when I looked in the mirror, I always saw my excess weight. Even though I'm not a thin woman, I never thought that my rounded features could actually be attractive. Until someone made me realize it. But that someone was someone who should never have been in my life. Hannah and I have been friends since I was a kid. She was my best friend, even more than that. At one point, I started to think of her as my sister. But looking back now, I realized that I did nothing but live in her shadow. Hannah was always perfect. She attracted people with her flawless beauty and was noticed in every environment she entered. She was tall, with a slim waist, full lips, and an irresistible aura. But most importantly, she was always on the winning side. She always got what she wanted. She always got the best grades, went to the best schools, got the most prestigious jobs. And of course, she married the most perfect man, Daniel. Daniel was a remarkable man from the first moment I saw him. Tall, well-built, with sharp features and a piercing gaze. And Hannah got him. Hannah always got the best. At first, I wasn't jealous of Hannah's marriage. On the contrary, I thought she was happy, and that was enough for me. But now I realize I was part of her marriage. Hannah was using me as a helper in her life. I was there to lighten her burden. I was there for her invitations, birthday events, moving, wedding preparations. I was always there for her, making her job easier. And strangely enough, I never questioned it. I saw it as a duty to run around for her, to be her best friend. But everything changed when Hannah got pregnant. Her temper became even harsher than before. Even small things made her angry. Even Daniel coming home a little late was a crisis. If he didn't behave the way she wanted him to, she'd yell and sometimes stay angry for hours. And there I was again. I put up with Hannah's outbursts, her tantrums, her trying to get me to do everything she said. But what I didn't realize was that Daniel put up with it too. Daniel was putting up with it too. And as he put up with Hannah, he started to look at me in a different way. I was noticing things now that I hadn't noticed before. Daniel was upset when he saw how Hannah treated me. One day, when Hannah was scolding me, he intervened. "Why are you doing this to Lisa? She just wants to help." And Hannah just rolled her eyes and walked away. But at that moment, I had a strange feeling. Someone was defending me, and I realized it for the first time. For the first time, I realized that Hannah wasn't always right. For the first time, I realized how bad she looked on the outside. And for the first time, I felt Daniel's gaze so clearly. But those looks, was it pity or something else? With such a beautiful woman, why would a man like Daniel look at me? Why would he look at me? Hannah was always striking. Her long, wavy blonde hair, her slim and flawless body, her sharp features. I was invisible in a room with Hannah. It was always like that. As a child, as a teenager, even now. So when I realized that Daniel's eyes were on me, I felt a strange uneasiness. I didn't even want to entertain the possibility. But that day, the day that changed everything, Hannah was yelling as usual. This time she was angry because Daniel had used the wrong glass in the kitchen. Yeah, that was it. You really can't do anything right, can you? Put that glass down. Really, your clumsiness is driving me crazy, Daniel. Daniel's face tensed up, but he took it in stride, like he always did until Hannah's patience ran out. I was in the kitchen, watching what was happening, and I couldn't help but say, "Calm down, Hannah." But Hannah got even more violent. She took a few steps forward, pressed her finger to Daniel's chest, and spoke harshly. "What are you saying? Are you defending that loser girl?" My whole body froze. This time Hannah's yelling hit me like a slap in the face. Loser, a word I'd heard for years, but thought I'd gotten used to. Daniel's eyes lit up. In that moment, for the first time since he married Hannah, I saw him truly angry. He took a deep breath, balled his hands into fists, and spoke in a harsh voice. "Stop it, Hannah." Hannah was surprised. Maybe she hadn't expected such a harsh outburst from Daniel, but that didn't stop him. "Are you arguing with me and over this girl?" she snapped. Daniel looked back at me. That look, that moment rocked my world. "I can't believe he let you talk to her like that for years," Daniel said, not taking his eyes off me. This wasn't possible. He was defending me. For the first time, someone was defending me against Hannah. But Hannah scoffed angrily. She narrowed her eyes and looked at me. Well. So we're showing compassion for our loser daughter? Daniel, are you seriously defending this girl against me? Daniel took a deep breath and spoke sharply. "At least she's not cruel like you." At that moment, the air in the room suddenly changed. Hannah was in shock, and so was I. How could he say that? And for me? A strange warmth rose inside me, but just then a voice shouted inside my head, "No, this is just pity. He can't really see me." But Daniel's eyes were saying something completely different. In an instant, Hannah stormed out of the kitchen, shutting the door hard. We stood in the echoing silence behind her. And at that moment, Daniel whispered, shaking his head from side to side, "Really? You've been used to this for years." My throat went dry. I couldn't think of anything to say, but he continued, "Is this normal for you?" I looked at the floor. I didn't know what to say, but a sentence echoed in my head. Why would such a handsome, powerful man, be interested in someone like me? I had gotten so used to living in Hannah's shadow that even when someone cared about me, I couldn't believe it was possible. But Daniel kept looking at me, and then the words came out of his mouth. "What I can't believe is that with a woman like you, why am I still married to Hannah?" Daniel's words were like a storm echoing in my brain. "What I can't believe is, with a woman like you, why am I still married to Hannah?" What did that mean? My heart raced. Something told me I should pretend I hadn't heard that, but it was too late. That sentence wasn't something that could be left in the air and forgotten. My eyes locked on Daniel's. I was trying to figure out what was going on inside him right now. Was he really looking at me like that? Or was it just a reflection of his anger at Hannah? But I couldn't deny the warmth that stirred inside me. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. Finally, I felt I had to say something. "Daniel, you shouldn't say that." But his voice sounded weaker than I thought it would. Daniel didn't take his eyes off me. He took a deep breath and shook his head from side to side. "Stop telling the truth?" My throat tightened. At that moment, I tried to suppress what I felt. It would have been a mistake. But then, Hannah stormed in. Her face was tense with anger. "Daniel, why are you still here? And why are you standing next to that girl?" Something inside me snapped. I was used to it, but Daniel wasn't. "Hannah, didn't we fight because you treated your friend like that? What the hell is this girl? She's your friend. Don't you have any respect for people?" "You're gonna stop talking to Lisa like that. I won't say it to you again." "What?" Hannah was shocked, and so was I. "Do you realize what you're saying?" she yelled. "You're my husband. Are you siding with this loser?" That's when Daniel lost his patience. "That's enough, Hannah," he shouted. His eyes were blazing with anger. "You and I have a marriage, but this is like a battlefield. He's sick of you being disrespectful to everyone, especially your friend who has carried you around for years, and it shows your true character." Hannah was stunned for a moment, but then she pulled herself together. If you're going to talk to me like that, get the hell out of my house. Daniel took a deep breath. I'm leaving. I'll take you home and you won't have to put up with this, he said. As soon as Hannah heard those words, she became angry and looked at me and told me to leave. For the first time in years, I felt the strength behind me to stand up to Hannah's attacks and insults. I looked back at her and told her to fuck off, which was almost a first for me. Then we rushed out of the house and Daniel asked me to drive you home. I said okay. In the car, he said to me, I don't know how you put up with this kind of treatment all these years. I didn't know what to say, but Daniel continued. I'm asking you again, is this normal for you? I averted my eyes. My heart was beating wildly. Why was he looking at me like that? We were in front of my house, and after a few minutes of silence, I said to Daniel, I don't know. She is part of me, and I don't want her to be sad, but I don't know. She looked at me meaningfully and said, What about you? Is it normal for you to be sad? Lisa, why are you doing this to yourself? You are an angel that a beautiful, intelligent woman with a pure heart like you can tolerate this kind of humiliation. I couldn't believe my ears. What was this man saying? Wasn't it just his wife's behavior that made him angry? Or was it an interest in me that made him angry? And that's when everything changed. Daniel put his hand to my face and a storm raged inside me. He stroked my cheek lightly. His eyes were in mine. He leaned in close and said, You deserve a better life, the life you deserve. Not being a sidekick to someone like Hannah, you're too special. He said, his breath on my breath as he said it. Our eyes met. For a moment, everything stopped. And at that moment, our lips met and kissed in a very loving kiss. I don't know how long this kiss lasted, but it seemed like an eternity to me, and suddenly I pulled myself back, got out of the car, and ran towards home. As soon as I stepped into the house, I was gasping for breath. My heart was beating so fast, it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. What have I done? I kissed Daniel. No, I didn't. He kissed me, but I didn't pull back. My hands were shaking. I went to the kitchen, stood at the sink, and took the ice-cold water in my hands and splashed it on my face. But nothing changed. I couldn't suppress the feeling that was stirring inside me. I closed my eyes and relived the moment. His hand was on my cheek. His eyes were in mine. You deserve so much better, he said. And then, he had kissed me. My lips were still burning. Oh God, what have I done? Daniel. That was the only name that echoed in my brain. But then Hannah's face appeared in my mind's eye. She was my friend, the friend who for years had humiliated me, belittled me, despised me, made my life a burden. But she was still my friend. How had I done it? I was going crazy inside myself. But at the same time, Daniel's words to me were burned into my brain. A woman like you shouldn't be condemned to a life like this. Is it normal for you to be sad, Lisa? You deserve so much better. I pressed my hands tightly to my head. I wanted to scream, "Shut up!" But I couldn't silence that voice. Because for the first time in years, someone had really seen me. And for the first time, I felt love and desire in a man's eyes. But it was wrong. I kept telling myself that, but my mind wouldn't stop thinking about Daniel. I had to forget the night we kissed. It was a mistake that would never happen again. But days passed. I didn't hear from Daniel or Hannah. Normally, Hannah would call me every day or at least say something useless. But this time, she was completely silent. It was making me uncomfortable. Not even a message from Daniel. That bothered me too. Finally, I couldn't bear the silent screaming inside me any longer. Hannah was pregnant and her pregnancy was already problematic. I had to find an excuse to check if she was okay, and I found it. I was going to cook for him and bring him dinner. It was just something I would do as a friend, right? I wanted to make sure Hannah was okay, but at the same time, did I want to see Daniel again? I tried to keep myself occupied all day, but there was a strange tension inside me. Even when I was preparing the food, my hands were shaking. I thought about having a glass of wine, but no, I needed to be sober. I was going to pretend to forget what had happened. I was just going to have a normal conversation with Daniel. When I got to the door, I took a deep breath, and I pressed the buzzer. The door opened, and there was Daniel. We froze for a moment. His eyes? He looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. A warmth spread through my chest. but I quickly pulled myself together. "I'm here to see Hannah," I said, clearing my throat. Daniel took a deep breath, then shook his head. "Hannah's not here." "What?" "After our argument, she packed her things and went to her mom's. Didn't you know?" "No." My voice was almost a whisper. I hadn't spoken to Hannah since that night, but now I felt a strange guilt. Daniel was standing in the doorway, watching me. I had to say something. I just wondered how she was doing. Her pregnancy was difficult after all. Daniel's lips curled slightly. Was it a smile, or was it a bitter expression? "Hannah will make her own way, Lisa," he said. Then he took a deep breath. "But I wanted to talk to you." I swallowed. "Come in." A few minutes later, I found myself at Daniel's house. Hannah's house. No, now I was saying Daniel's house. Everything was still in Hannah's order, but she was gone. She was gone. Why did that make me so uneasy? He walked into the kitchen, took a glass of wine out of the cupboard. "Would you like a glass?" he asked. I nodded, thinking it would make me more relaxed. I took my own glass, took a sip, and the red wine went down my throat with a warm sensation. Daniel sat down at the dining table. I sat next to him, the food I had brought in front of us. We ate together in silence, but the silence, it wasn't just any silence. The air was charged with electricity. Daniel was the first to speak. "Lisa." I raised my eyes. "We need to talk about that night." My heart felt like it was going to stop. "There's nothing to talk about," I said quickly, but Daniel didn't hold back. "Really? Then why are you here?" I didn't know what to say. I clutched my wine glass tightly. Why was I here? Did I care about Hannah's well-being, or did I just want to see Daniel again? Daniel took a deep breath. "Did you miss me, Lisa?" I gasped. I shook my head from side to side. "We can't do that." Daniel raised his glass, downing the wine in one gulp. "But you want to." His eyes locked on mine. "I want it too." My whole body trembled. I shook my head from side to side. "That's not true, Daniel." But my voice was shaking. He stood up, and so did I. I headed for the door. "I have to get out of here." Daniel followed me. Just as I reached the door, I stopped. When I turned around, Daniel was looking at me. I leaned down slightly to say goodbye, to give him a kiss on the cheek. But at that moment, Daniel's hand wrapped around my waist. Something inside me exploded. Under the influence of alcohol, all the emotions I had been holding inside me that night exploded. The kiss slipped not from my cheek, but from my lips. And then I was in a moment of passion that made my knees tremble and took my breath away. Daniel's hands gripped my waist and pulled me to him. My hands went to his hair and gripped it tightly. Daniel's hands moved down to my hips, and he took me in his arms. On the kitchen table, where Hannah always talked about their life together, all over the house, in the bed they'd made together, the bed Hannah had raved about. The whole world had vanished, emotions I'd been starving for years, passion, longing. It all poured into that kiss. There was no turning back now. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I felt was warmth. Not the warmth of my own skin, but someone else's. For a moment, I wondered where I was. Then, reality crashed over me like a wave. Daniel's arms were still around me. We were both completely naked, and he was holding me tight. His body was wrapped around mine. Last night, I lifted my head slightly. Daniel was still asleep. He was taking deep breaths, a look of relief on his face. But not inside me. What had I done? This was the biggest risk I had ever taken in my life. But strangely, I had no regrets. For the first time, I was free. For the first time, I had done something I really wanted. And the feeling was addictively sweet. I was fighting inside myself, but I didn't want to win the battle. For the first time, it was good to be defeated. Just as I tried to move, I heard Daniel's voice. "Don't go." I froze. I raised my eyes. He was awake too. His eyes were still sleepy, but his gaze was clearer than ever. He didn't want to leave me. I didn't want to leave him. But it couldn't be that easy. Daniel rested his head on the pillow and took a deep breath. "I know I should feel guilty," he said in a low voice, "but I don't." I understood him. I didn't feel it either. But Daniel's face turned serious for a moment. I have only one regret, Lisa. My heart clenched. My child. His eyes darkened for a moment. I lost my son by doing this. I swallowed. Daniel's only regret was not Hannah, but the child he could have left fatherless. His only attachment to Hannah was no longer love, only his child. And could I have caused that child to grow up without a father? I felt a slight pang, but then another reality hit me. Hannah wasn't expecting her child with Daniel. That child was with another man. I blinked, even though I knew it. I hid everything last night because I didn't want Daniel to be upset. But now, what would he do if he knew the truth? Would he blame me? Would he not believe me? Or would I be a liar to him, like Hannah? I didn't know. Throughout the night, my hatred for Hannah and relief at leaving her behind had spread through me. But now, the truth was like a slap in the face. After years of Hannah crushing me, I was depriving her of her most precious possession. I knew I had to tell Daniel, but what if he didn't believe me? What if he thinks I said something like that because I hated Hannah? What if he thinks I'm just as bad as Hannah? Should I tell him the truth? I looked at Daniel's face. He was still thoughtful, but when he saw my eyes, he smiled slightly. Lisa, when I was with you, I felt at peace for the first time. My heart clenched. Should I tell her that, or should I keep quiet? What would you do? Should Lisa reveal the truth? Will Daniel believe her, or will he go back to Hannah? Waiting for your comments? Don't forget to like and subscribe.